Look, I know how this sounds. Believe me, I really do. The title, the whole mess. I can see the judgment forming in your eyes already, the way your mouth is starting to twist into that familiar shape, the one people use when they've already made up their minds. But can you just hear me out? Just for a little while?
Give me a chance to explain.
Because it's not as simple as it looks. It never is. You don't know what it's like to feel like you're drowning in a perfectly pleasant, perfectly normal, perfectly boring life. You don't know what it's like to be suffocated by someone's goodness, to want to scream because everything is just so nice. My name is Clara and I'm 32 and my husband is gone. And everyone thinks I'm a joke. But it's not that simple. It really isn't. We had been together for almost 12 years, Daniel and I. Since we were kids, really. High school sweethearts, the kind of story that makes people sigh and say, "Oh, how sweet." He was everything you're supposed to want. A kind, steady, reliable. He remembered my favorite coffee. He opened doors for me. He always made sure I had my jacket. My parents adored him. My friends thought he was a saint, a truly good man. And he was. Don't get me wrong, he really was. He worked hard. He had a stable job. He talked about our future with such certainty, such unwavering calm. He was the rock. The kind of person you build a life with, the one who brings you soup when you're sick and listens patiently when you're ranting about your boss. He was the gold standard, the benchmark against which all other men were measured and always found lacking. For everyone else, anyway. But that was the problem, wasn't it? That perfection. It was so flawless. So unyielding. Like a perfectly polished stone, beautiful to look at, but utterly devoid of any sharp edges, any unexpected cracks, any real depth you could sink your fingers into. He was always attentive, but it felt like constant surveillance. His love was so predictable, like a train on a fixed track, arriving precisely on schedule, every single day. There was no thrill, no wildness, no moment where you wondered what might happen next. It was all laid out, neatly, predictably, beautifully. And for so long, I told myself that was what I wanted. Stability, security, a nice, quiet life. But a quiet life, it turns out, can be deafening when all you hear is the hum of your own unfulfilled desires. Our life was a loop, a perfectly circular track with no off-ramps. Every Friday night, we'd order the same pizza from the same place, half pepperoni for him, half veggie for me. Every Saturday, we'd go to the farmer's market and he'd buy me flowers. Every Sunday, we'd visit his parents for dinner. Tuesdays were our date night. Always a movie, always the same cinema, always the same row. It sounds sweet, right? Like comfort. But after a decade of the same comfort, it starts to feel like a cage made of velvet. You're not quite sure how you got in, but you know you can't get out without tearing something beautiful. And who wants to be the one to rip apart something that everyone else envies? I'd look at him across the dinner table, or watching a movie, or just reading a book next to me on the couch, and I'd feel this overwhelming, suffocating sense of nothing. Not hate, not even boredom, just this vast, empty space where passion was supposed to be. And then the guilt would rush in, because how could I feel that way about such a good man? What was wrong with me? And then Leo walked into my life.
Leo.
He was the polar opposite of Daniel. If Daniel was a perfectly brewed cup of chamomile tea, Leo was a shot of pure, unadulterated espresso. He started at my office, in the department right next to mine. He had this wild, messy hair and a laugh that seemed to echo through the cubicles, a deep, resonant sound that made you want to laugh along with him, even if you didn't know what was funny. He wore these band t-shirts and ripped jeans, even to the office, and no one seemed to care because he was just magnetic. He had this way of looking at me like he was actually seeing me, not just the good girl Clara everyone else saw. He'd make these dark, edgy jokes, the kind that would make Daniel shift uncomfortably in his seat and say, "That's a bit much, isn't it?" But with Leo, I just found myself laughing harder, feeling a spark ignite inside me that I hadn't known was extinguished. It started innocently enough, just office banter, shared coffees, a few complaints about work. But then it became more. He'd linger at my desk, talking about his weekend adventures, about the bands he'd seen, the art he'd discovered. He was living this life that seemed so vibrant, so full of spontaneity, so utterly unlike mine. He told me I was funny, that I had a wicked sense of humor hidden beneath my quiet exterior. No one had ever said that to me before. Daniel always said I was sweet or thoughtful. Leo made me feel like I was a wild animal just waiting to be unleashed. And I started to believe him. The first real transgression?
It was a text message.
A late-night text after we'd worked late on a project. Just a simple, "Hey, you did great today. Good night," nothing, right? Harmless. But my stomach fluttered, a different kind of flutter than I'd ever felt with Daniel. It felt illicit, and I liked it. From there, it was a slippery slope, greased with lies and half-truths. Lunches that extended too long, coffee breaks that turned into an hour of intense conversation in the park across the street. We started texting constantly about everything and nothing. He'd ask me about my dreams, my fears, the things I secretly wanted to do. Daniel never asked me about my dreams. He just assumed they aligned with his, which were perfectly practical and reasonable. Leo made me feel like I was a person with a vast, unexplored inner world. He made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in what felt like forever. And the thrill of it, the sheer, intoxicating rush of keeping the secret, of living this double life, it was like a drug. It made everything else, everything with Daniel, fade into a dull, gray background. My heart would pound every time my phone buzzed, every time Leo's name flashed across the screen. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly addictive. I started telling Daniel I was working late more often, or meeting up with old friends I hadn't seen in years. He never questioned it. Never. He'd just say, "Okay, honey, be safe. Text me when you're home." His trust, which I once cherished, became a weapon in my hand, something I could exploit without consequence. It made me feel powerful, almost invincible. Like I was pulling off this incredible feat of deception, and he was just too naive, too good, to even suspect. And part of me, the cruel, desperate part, almost resented him for it. Why wasn't he noticing? Why wasn't he asking questions? If he had just shown a flicker of suspicion, maybe, just maybe, I would have stopped. But he didn't. He just kept being Daniel, perfectly loving, perfectly trusting, perfectly blind. And that, I told myself, was his fault, not mine. I was just reacting to his complacency. Right. The line blurred. We went from lunches to drinks after work, then to dinners in dimly lit corners of restaurants where no one we knew would see us. The conversations grew more intimate, the glances lingered longer. His hand would accidentally brush mine under the table, and a jolt would go through me. I was falling, fast and hard, into something I knew was wrong but felt so undeniably right. He told me he was falling for me too, that he'd never met anyone like me, that I was this wild, beautiful spirit trapped in a mundane existence. He saw me as a phoenix, he said, ready to burn it all down and rise from the ashes. And I believed him. Every single word. I convinced myself that this was what true love felt like, this raw, visceral, almost painful longing. The comfortable, quiet love I had with Daniel? That was a lie. A convenient arrangement. A compromise. This, with Leo, this was the truth. This was passion. This was what I deserved. The major betrayal happened on a Friday night, our usual pizza night. I told Daniel I had a work emergency.
He believed me.
He always believed me. And I went to Leo's apartment. It was everything I had been craving, the spontaneity, the danger, the intoxicating rush of finally crossing the line. When I woke up in his bed the next morning, tangled in sheets that smelled of him, of passion and rebellion, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and a hollow pit of dread. But the exhilaration won. I felt alive. Truly, utterly alive for the first time in years. I looked at my phone, a text from Daniel. "Pizza was lonely without you, but I saved you a slice. Sleep well." Honey, my stomach twisted, but I pushed it down. This was the real me. I told myself. This was the life I was meant to live. And Daniel was just a casualty of my self-discovery. That has to count for something, right? I thought this was my new beginning. I thought Leo was my future, my escape. We spent the next few weeks in a dizzying whirlwind of stolen moments, hushed conversations, and clandestine meetings. I started to map out our future in my head. Us, together, living this wild, unconventional life he had promised. I started to imagine telling Daniel, imagining the freedom, the lightness I would feel once the truth was out. I convinced myself that this was noble, in a way, that I was being true to myself, that I was choosing my own happiness. And then, it shattered. Leo, after a particularly passionate evening, pulled away. He looked at me, his eyes suddenly devoid of the passion that had captivated me. He said, and I remember every word, every excruciating syllable, "Clara, this has been amazing. Truly. But you know this is just fun, right? I told you from the start I'm not really a relationship guy. And you're married." My world spun. I felt cold, a sudden, piercing cold that cut through the haze of passion.
What? What was he talking about?
He was talking about us, our future, our connection. He'd said I was special, unique. He'd said he was falling for me. My voice was a strangled whisper as I asked him, "What do you mean?" You said you were falling for me. You said I was a phoenix." He actually chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Oh, Clara. You're sweet, you really are." And yes, I was. But that doesn't mean I'm looking for a wife, you know? This was just a good time. A bit of an escape for both of us, wasn't it? He actually said that. He lumped me in with him, like I was just as non-committal, just as casual, just as selfish. He made me feel like a fool. A naive, desperate fool. And then he added, almost as an afterthought, "Plus, my ex-girlfriend, Sarah? She's coming back to town. We're going to give things another try." My stomach dropped. He had an ex-girlfriend? He hadn't mentioned her. Ever. That exciting mirage vanished, leaving me standing in the desert, alone. I left his apartment in a daze, the city lights blurring around me. The tattoo, the very symbol of my conviction, now felt like a brand, a mark of my foolishness. It was a small, delicate design, just his initials LG on my inner wrist. A secret only he and I would ever know, I'd told myself. A permanent reminder of this glorious, fiery passion. Now it felt like a sick joke. I went home, not knowing what else to do, and Daniel was still awake, waiting up for me. He looked at me, his face calm, almost serene. He asked, "Everything okay, honey?" That was a long night, and I just stared at him, the weight of my betrayal suddenly crushing me. I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't even speak. And that's when he walked over to the coffee table and picked up my phone. My phone, which I had carelessly left unlocked on the table beside the couch. He held it up, and the screen glowed with the last few messages between Leo and me, the ones where I had been planning my grand escape, the ones where I had been pouring out my heart, thinking Leo was doing the same.
He didn't yell.
He didn't scream. He didn't even raise his voice. That was Daniel. Always calm, always composed. He just looked at me, and his eyes, usually so warm and full of affection, were like chips of ice. He said, very quietly, I knew. "I've known for a while, Clara. Not everything, not the extent of it, not him." He nodded at the phone. "But I knew something was wrong."
"You changed."
"You were distant. You were always on your phone, always working late. I hoped it wasn't what I thought it was." He paused, and then he added, his voice barely a whisper, "I found your burner phone, too. The one you thought you were so clever about. Your texts with your friend, Sasha, about how bored you were. And the credit card statements from those fancy restaurants I never went to." He had been watching. All this time. He had been gathering evidence, systematically, quietly, while I was off playing the fool. And the ultimate humiliation. He knew about the tattoo. He must have. He never said anything, but he knew. The knowledge that he had been aware of my self-deception, that he had witnessed my slow descent into this pathetic, desperate charade, was worse than any anger he could have thrown at me. Then, he did something I never expected from gentle Daniel. He simply stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, "I want you to leave. Now, not we need to talk. Not, how could you? Just leave." My mind reeled. I tried to speak, to beg, to explain, to apologize, but no words came out. He walked past me to the bedroom, and when he came back, he had a small duffel bag. "I've already packed some things for you. Essentials. You can come back tomorrow with your friend to get the rest of your stuff when I'm not here. My lawyer will be in touch." My lawyer. He had already consulted a lawyer. He had already planned this. It was over.
Just like that.
The clean break was devastatingly swift. He then walked to the front door, opened it, and stood there, waiting for me to walk through it. There was no negotiation, no tearful plea, no last embrace. Just the cold finality of a door held open. And as I stepped out into the night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo.
"Hey, sorry about tonight.
Good luck with everything." He'd already blocked me on everything else. The exciting mirage gone. And I was standing on the curb, with my little duffel bag, my heart a raw, bleeding wound, and the cold, hard truth that I had completely and utterly destroyed my own life. The days that followed were a blur of humiliation and despair. Daniel blocked me everywhere. His number, social media, even our shared accounts. My calls to him went straight to voicemail. His family, who had treated me like a daughter for over a decade, cut me off entirely. His mother, who used to hug me so tightly, sent me a text that simply said, "You broke his heart. Don't ever contact him again." My own friends, the ones who had been sympathetic to my boredom with Daniel, suddenly looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. Sasha, my confidant, tried to be supportive, but even she started saying things like, "Clara, maybe you went a little too far with the tattoo. Honey, a little too far?" I destroyed my marriage. I was the punchline of every gossip session. I saw their eyes following me, their whispers, the way they'd suddenly change the subject when I walked into a room. My social circle, once so vibrant and full, shrank to nothing. I was truly, utterly alone. I tried to reach out to Daniel, of course. I left letters at his door, which he never opened. I went to his office, but his secretary, a sweet older woman who had always been so kind to me, just shook her head and said, "He's in a meeting, Clara." "He's always in a meeting for you." It was a polite dismissal, a final wall. And then came the news, snippets from mutual acquaintances that were like tiny shards of glass. Daniel was doing great. He'd thrown himself into his work, gotten a promotion, started traveling for leisure, something he'd always wanted to do but I'd always discouraged, saying it was too much. He looked healthier, happier. Friends mentioned he was going to the gym, that he'd lost weight, that he looked lighter. My betrayer, the man I'd convinced myself was my soulmate, was nowhere to be found. He'd simply vanished, a fleeting mistake, an irrelevant distraction. My life, however, was stagnating. I was still working the same job, coming home to an empty apartment, spending my evenings scrolling through social media, seeing glimpses of Daniel's new, vibrant life, a life I had foolishly thought I was escaping from. The hardest part was when I ran into Daniel's mother at the grocery store. My heart leaped, thinking, foolishly, that maybe she would soften, maybe she would understand. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a grief that mirrored my own, but also a fierce, protective anger. She said, her voice low and steady, "Clara, I loved you like my own daughter. But you broke my son. You took his trust, his kindness, his heart, and you threw it away for nothing. He gave you everything and you still wanted more. What you did was selfish. And I truly hope one day you understand the depth of the pain you caused." And then she walked away, leaving me standing there in the middle of the produce aisle, the weight of her words a physical burden. She was right. She was absolutely right. I was selfish. But even in that moment, a part of me rebelled, screaming, "But I wanted to be happy. Doesn't that count for something?" The final blow came 6 months ago. I saw it on social media, a picture Daniel's cousin had posted. Daniel, smiling, truly smiling, his arm around a beautiful woman. She was radiant, her eyes sparkling with genuine joy. The caption read, "So happy for these two. Engagement party was a blast." Engagement. He was engaged. After everything, after me, after my colossal mess, he had found someone else. Someone who made him look genuinely happy. A happiness that I realized, with a sickening lurch, he had never truly experienced with me. He was getting married again.
To someone who wasn't me.
Someone who, I just knew, would appreciate his quiet stability, his unwavering kindness, the very things I had found so suffocating, the very things I had thrown away.
And here I am.
Still alone. Still grappling with the wreckage I created. Do I regret it? That's the question, isn't it? The one everyone wants to ask. Part of me, the part that's still reeling from the loneliness, the isolation, the sheer emptiness of my life, regrets it deeply. I miss Daniel's steady presence, his quiet love, the comfort of knowing I had someone solid, someone who loved me unconditionally. But then another part of me, the one that still feels that desperate, suffocating need for something more, something wilder, that part whispers, you had to do it. You had to choose yourself. You had to find out what was out there. I wanted something different. I wanted passion, excitement, that movie-level romance. And I found it for a fleeting, intoxicating moment. It burned me, yes, it burned everything down around me, but at least I felt something, right? At least I tried to break free. So, do I regret seeking out what I felt was missing?
No.
I don't regret wanting more from life. I don't regret wanting to feel alive. I regret the choices I made, the way I went about it, the incredible pain I inflicted on someone who didn't deserve it. Daniel didn't deserve it.
He really didn't. He was a good man.
A good, kind, steady man who just couldn't give me the chaos I craved. Or maybe I just couldn't appreciate the peace he offered. And now I'm here, with a stupid tattoo of initials that mean nothing, a shattered life, and the bitter taste of freedom I never truly wanted. What do you think? Was it worth it? Or am I just a fool who deserved everything I got?